Sammy, you would agree if I say writers prompt us to pause and think about our surroundings. We live our lives with blinkers on, and when we come across a thought provoking book, we look at everyday life in a different perspective. Humanity is a rare commodity, I would say. So when we see someone who embodies the values of humanity, we put them on a pedestal. This is indeed a matter of concern. When, as humans, we find humanity an alien concept, we need to dig deep into our moral reserves and have the courage to question our actions. The book we have the privilege of discussing today is hashtag Time for Humanity. And the author of this life defining book is Samie Al-Achrafi. Thank you, Samie, for being with us today. We welcome you to our online forum. And before I invite you for your kind words, I would like to talk little bit about Samie. He's driven by creating performance cultures shaped by values. His company, very interesting name, I would say, Marmalade Fish, is the first and the only certified B Corporation companies balancing purpose and profit in the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. When he is not listening to true crime podcasts, he's exploring nature trails. Now that's living it up. The Reiki master enjoys neurofeedback training and has a brilliant academic background. He's an expert on human resources and psychology. And what drives him is his simplicity. We have with us today someone who is all set to revive humanity. Samie, a very warm welcome and over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rashna, and of course, all of the community of Millennium Mams. It's such an honor. In the introduction, I love what you said about humanity being, for some of us, an alien concept. And it makes me think, will it require aliens or artificial intelligence over this decade to force us to have the conversations we've been reluctant to have, it seems, for the last 200,000 years of who are we? Who do we want to be? Where do we want to go? And this I describe in the book as conscious leadership. You could also call it inclusive leadership. But because I've done work with altered states of consciousness through brainwave patterns, as you mentioned in your kind introduction, the raising of consciousness is something that all of us are doing in this very moment. We're all possible leaders. Even a 10-year-old boy, even a 90-year-old woman, we can step up and demonstrate leadership as a verb. But whilst anybody can be a leader, not everybody is. And what we're seeing is we're coming out of a period of where we're questioning, is leadership something that only happens in your mid-30s to mid-40s, early 50s, that we associate with titles like assistant vice president and vice president? Or is leadership something that can be demonstrated by the 10-year-old boy by speaking up and defending somebody in the school, by protecting his sister, or by the old lady giving mentorship and information to the coming generation? You see, over the last few decades, we have seen the pendulum has swung too far in one direction. You'll notice from the book I talk about, part one, the unconscious past. And I could have started in government or politics, or I chose to examine the world of business because so many of us have an experience of work. And through that shared experience, I suggest the pendulum has an opportunity to come back a little bit more towards center. It's not that I am pro-socialism, pro-capitalism, anti. The book does not place politics within the context. What I'm suggesting is within the capitalistic societies that we find ourselves in today, and without judgment, because we recognize it has lifted certain people, in fact, millions out of poverty. At the same time, it has left large segments of our community society behind. And is that what we want? The condition of being human, for some to succeed at the expense of others? I think that the post-pandemic world will offer us a reset, not dissimilar to post-Second World War, where you saw the formation of management structures, the introduction of performance management, the gung-ho capitalism, which said profit almost at any costs, working with the chemicals in our brain and body to release dopamine when we achieve results and targets, and working with the bias of our humanity in order to produce certain results for certain segments of society. That might be okay, but the Time for Humanity hashtag is more than a book. The hashtag is a community of people who, like today, are willing for us to have a conversation, which at times will be practical. I will say to leaders in business, what are the things you can do to demonstrate your values behaviorally and more consistently? How do you connect your organizational purpose with all layers of employees in the organization? And philosophically, where we talk about those big things of what it means to be human. I show this slide because I do have a sense that the ways that we have been managing, not leading, have brought us to a point which is unsustainable. And by that, I don't just mean sustainability as environment, but I think about sustainable for us in order to thrive as a species. There is a section of the book which is inspired of the philosophy of lessons from the East, where I talk about Taoism and the balance of that pendulum, that we're not separate to nature. We think we are, but we are nature. When I went in January to Rwanda and I was with the gorillas, it appeared to me very quickly that the dominion that we place over animals is an illusion. Our ego would have us believe that we are separate. It's not real. We are nature. And in that moment, I recognized, yes, I might have language and an enhanced ability to use tools, but the gorilla had dominion over me. I was aware of that when swimming in Australia. Where are those sharks? We're not always the one who has the most power. And of course, let's think about the power that we're giving to artificial intelligence. It sounds sexy. We don't really understand it. Even the AI experts don't even understand what is being input. But slowly but surely across this decade, unless we have this conversation, AI will become potentially more powerful because it will have more knowledge than us. And what does that mean for our species? In Taoism, you have yin, yang. You have also Shiva or Shakti, or receptive or active. All of life is a balance and equilibrium. The Buddha said, when playing an instrument that looks like a guitar, make sure the string is tight enough so it plays, but not tight so that it snaps. What is Maya, or the middle way, the equilibrium that we can find? And then I talk about the traits of masculine and feminine. I don't mean gender. I believe that we are made up of beautiful qualities, traits, and characteristics. Call them whatever you like. I will call them for now, of ease of common understanding, masculine and feminine. We have found that our society often prioritizes the masculine above the feminine. In my mind, drive, results, ambition, competitiveness, success, achievement, delivery, these are what I define as qualities and traits and characteristics that we can call more active, with masculine. But what about nurturing, patience, flexibility, deep listening, empathy, compassion, understand? Let's call these the feminine traits. All human beings, regardless of gender, have a mixture of these traits. But as we leave this conversation and we go back into the real world, if our society is set up to prioritize certain traits over others, then it becomes clear why we would dim our humanity and acquire layers. The irony with marmalade fish, and maybe you're beginning to see the fish here as well in the symbol, the consultancy we do, learning and leadership. Isn't it funny that we teach leaders only the feminine stuff, really? In order to achieve the results, we say, focus on deep listening, collaboration, partnering. And then you go back to work. And what do? KPIs, deliveries, targets. There is a disconnect, which I'm hoping we can find a way to address. Because in nature, we see equilibrium or balance. As humans, we have a fundamental need to be seen before we are heard and before we are spoken to. I was having a conversation with my mum a couple of weeks ago. I've not seen her for over a year and a half because of the pandemic. She's in the United Kingdom. She said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm so tired of hearing everybody's opinion. I'm finding whenever I speak to people, it's like I'm silent and they're just telling me opinions, opinions, opinions." And I said to my mum in that moment, nobody really is asking how I am. Now, I started to think about when we're busy, and in our society, I think busyness is a badge of honor. If it wasn't, then you wouldn't hear it so much at work, because at work, we want to look good. How are you? I'm busy. How's your week? Busy. So we know busyness is seen to be a good thing, even though we have the brain research and the studies to tell us it's not a good thing. How do we find ways to suspend our opinions a little bit longer, to see, like the three wise monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, speak, to see and to hear people, even if it's a little bit longer? And the book explores in one of the chapters in the middle part, which is called The Awakening Present. How are you going to demonstrate conscious leadership in a global world? With not frameworks, because as I was saying, Rachna, we had a conversation earlier, I'm not going to give frameworks to be more human. However, there are some tips and techniques on what we can do when we step into leadership in order to pull more than push and make people feel that their fundamental need to be seen and heard is validated through our leadership. Michelangelo was asked, "How did you create the finest sculpture on earth?" And he replied, "I didn't." And the person said, "What do you mean you didn't? It's your sculpture." the statue of David. He said, I worked with marble that the other sculptors didn't want to work with. My job was to chip away at everything that was not David. All we have to do is remember we are born enlightened, and the condition of being human is to refine enlightenment across our life. We're here to learn our lessons and to evolve. If we don't learn our lessons, the patterns will be recreated for us across hundreds of years until we choose to. But at an individual level, the way I can step into my empowerment is knowing I'm already within the block of marble. I, like you, just need to chip away at a little bit to reveal my true finer nature. And this requires only small 1%, 1 degree shifts. It requires intentionality or consciousness every morning. What is one thing I can do today to bring some of these concepts to life? For me, I say, be you, do you, for you. When the Titanic ship sank, if it had moved 1 degree, 1 second earlier, it would have sailed by. I think we can agree we all see the iceberg in front of us at the moment. What is the 1 degree shift that we're willing to make? How do we move from knowledge to action? Because with knowledge is responsibility. As Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, start with loving your family. Don't worry about changing the whole of society. Many people I work with, they say, all well and good, Samie. You want to bring humanity to the fore. I'm worried about paying the bills tomorrow or succeeding to the end of this week. I'm just trying to keep it together. This is why the invitation is, so what is one thing? And because I wasn't able to celebrate my 40th birthday as I perhaps had planned, I decided instead I would choose to be empowered, and I will do 40 acts of humanity to represent 40 years on Earth. I'm only up to act number 16. But what I love is every day it makes me go, I wonder what I can do as another act. And you know, the acts are so simple. It's buying roses for the foreign workers, females, who have not seen their children for 2 years. It's feeding the stray cats in the community. One of my favorites, I put on gloves and a couple of us, we walked around our community and we picked up, can you believe masks are the new plastic now being discarded? We picked up all the masks, all the cigarette butts, like you would imagine cleaning a beach in Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of weeks later, I saw a young lady, a leader, maybe 13 or 14 years of age. And she said, I'm picking up because there was this old guy who I heard about who's doing the same. And I thought, well, I'm the old guy, but anyway, I'm glad. And that's it. I wanted to offer a little bit of an insight across the 3 parts. The third part being the awakened future, which is where we turn the periscope, which we normally look at others, around onto ourselves, and we commit to doing one thing differently. The last thing I'll say is, if you invest $100 on the 1st of January, and every day you make a 1% investment, by the end of the year, you have $3,778. What's one thing? Time for Humanity is our community. I hope that gave you an overview, and I know you and many of the Millennium Mams have some questions. So I will stop sharing my screen there, and over to you, Rachna.
Thank you. Thank you, Samie, for sharing your thoughts. And you rightly said that we are all here to learn our lessons and evolve. And 1 degree shift from knowledge to action can bring about a change for sure. And Sammy, thanks for also finding a positive point, because where the world is like, there's so much of cry and hue, and people are saying that they're so negative about things happening around, but you have spoken about catastrophe, which means in Greek turning point. COVID has been described as a one in a century event and is a catastrophic event. So, please, if you could share with us how the COVID catastrophe can be the turning point for human civilization, not only in terms of economic growth, but also humanity.
Mm. I think it's a turning point because if there can be positives out of this global challenge, it's an awareness that we are all equal, from royalty Prince Charles all the way through to the person who cleans. We're
Yes.
equally vulnerable as human beings, and the virus has illuminated something that maybe needed to be shown to us for a long time. There's a very short chapter on systems intelligence.
Mhm.
It suggests everything is information, revealing what we need to deal with in order to evolve as an individual, community, and species. I wonder where in the past decades people were being starved of oxygen metaphorically. But when you want to change behavior, recognize 95% of humanity are not innovators. It means the vast norm, we like what's safe. And this, of course, goes back to certain parts of our brain which used to keep us alive. Therefore, people who embrace change are not better, but there is a recognition that change is something that we hold resistance to because as a species, we want to survive, our bodies want to survive. And so only when it comes to a global reset, I believe is that point that we describe as catastrophe turning point. Because you want to change and get different results. If you do so from actions alone, like a New Year's resolution, it might only last a few weeks. We need to go deeper and examine our beliefs, our paradigms. And when do paradigms really shift? In tragedy. Let's use the tragedy in order to evolve as individuals and then collectively. But it starts with me. Remember, be you, do you, for you, and only then, when I have compassion for self, can I extend it beyond myself to loved ones, and then eventually to the whole of humanity.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Sonali, you can come in with your question.
Yes. Hi, Sammy.
Hi, Sonali.
My first question to you is about brain waves. That was an interesting part in the book, and I really loved it. Every experience we have as human being is because we have an underlying pattern of brain waves. So, could you share about your amazing experience at BioCybernaut Institute for the audience who I get to read the book?
Absolutely. Well, very, very briefly, I will
Yes.
describe a couple of years ago, I found myself doing a project in Singapore, and a gentleman was sat next to me, and he said, I have a message for you. And initially, I thought of running away. When I chose to listen to him, he said, I've been waiting for you. I think you need to go to BioCybernaut. And I felt like a puppet with the strings. And I just said, I didn't even know what it was. I said, yes. 2 years later, I traveled to Bavaria in the south of Germany, where I was fitted with electrodes that gave me real-time feedback on when I was accessing different brainwaves. We tend to spend most of our day in beta or beta: concentration, thinking, planning, analyzing, irrational. First of all, we wanted to go into the alpha brainwaves, an elevated state of consciousness where meditation, creativity, insights exist. And every time I was able to go into an alpha brainwave, one of the ECGs would go beep, 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 and make a noise. So I knew what would stop me and what would help me get into them. And would you believe the easiest way that I found to create alpha was doing forgiveness and gratitude work. When the tones were silent and I wasn't in alpha, I thought, what do I do? How do I get? And I realized alpha is not what you think. It is the art of not thinking, often associated with your favorite workout, the nature trail, the forest, or your favorite song, but it takes you into a different state. And then boo, 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 the tones would start to elevate. Over the course of a week, you started to see my brainwaves separate and organize. And what was amazing was months later, I went to do theta, which is often hypnosis, or the seconds just before sleep, when you go into a dreamlike state. It widens the envelope between subconscious and conscious, because from here we think at 20,000 bits per second, but from here, 4 billion bits. So when you work on your subconscious, we looked at my alpha brainwaves, and they had not just retained at a higher level with organization, but they had amplified in my real life. So the other day I was spinning. It's an indoor class. It's like an enjoyable hell. Lights off, music blasting, and it's on a bicycle for 45 minutes. A problem I had held for a couple of days, when I didn't worry about the problem, but I just went into alpha, boom, 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 the entire solution emerged to me. I was living outside of time because you don't have a clock in there, but I got the solution plus more. So Nali, just to wrap up that story, I believe in serendipity and fate. At the end of my biocybernaut experience, on my website at the bottom, there is an image where you see my auric field and a third eye. That photograph is taken without filters, and it was done at the end of the training when I wanted to express gratitude to that person I met in Singapore years ago. As I went into the state of alpha forgiveness and gratitude, would you believe I remember his business card flashing in slow motion in front of me? I remembered, the brain is so remarkable. I remembered his email address, and I sent him an email that evening. I said, "Hi, you won't remember me, but you changed my life. I wanted to say thank you." About 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door, and when I opened the door, he was stood in front. He said, "I've just arrived." I don't know what that means, but I believe that when we are conscious to things, events, signs in our life, then we pay attention, we take notice.
Wow.
Hi, Samie. Samie,
Yes.
what a wonderful experience, and this is how miracles happen in life. And Samie, Samie, your book is almost spiritual. I mean, it is a spiritual guide for leaders. And Samie, my question is, you have outlined the characteristics of a leader. And for example, a leader should be complete with his past. He should have overcome his ego. Should have discovered the oneness with the universe. He always listens from the future. So my question is that if a person has achieved all this to some extent, will he become a leader? Like, will he become a change for the world?
I believe, thank you for the question. I believe, but the thing about beliefs is they're all perspectives. They're partially right and they're all partially wrong. It just varies by degree. So I say, have opinions, but hold them lightly. My belief, which is held lightly, is that even on this call, we are having a positive impact and ripples on the people in our work, in our community, in our household. Elevated consciousness can happen just by interacting or having a phone call, by being in the presence of leaders like yourself and the other Millennium Mams and Bishu Sir as well, of all of us on the call, are elevating our awareness and consciousness just by the very nature of having the intentionality to connect in this way. The challenge is, I have chosen, I believe, to be a human. I cannot become not human. And therefore, it will always be within Samie to stay vigilant to the ego, which can arise in any second. But for me, arises more often when I feel very hot, when I feel not slept, I've not had a great week maybe of sleeping. I recognize there are certain situations and things which make my, I call it the monkey, the chimp, the not Samie to arise and to start taking control for a second. All I try to do in that moment on my long journey is say, hello, I call him Coco, my monkey. Hello, Coco. I see you. I recognize you. And I'm going to choose not to react, but I'm going to choose to respond. Responsibility is your ability to respond. And it was Viktor Frankl, the survivor of a Holocaust, who said, the last human freedom is your ability to choose your response in any given situation. And often from stimulus or trigger to reaction, the response is just a few seconds, a space. But when you begin to know the brain and the body, mind, body, spirit, which hopefully we connect in the book, you realize emotional responses are human, but it only takes 6 seconds for the initial chemical release to be dissolved. It means at some level, after 6 seconds of being furious, angry, tormented, exposed, then I have a choice to stay in that state. It's a long journey. I get it wrong all the time. But the most lovely thing for me is when I can say, I know that's Coco. I know that's not really me. But level 2 of this work is to go, but Coco kind of is you. That's a whole different conversation. Maybe book 2.
Well, Samie, I believe that age is just a number for you. And as you've said in the book, millennials and post-millennials will explore new solutions even if they are perceived as controversial. They will bring new energy to business. How do we bridge the gap between the different age groups in businesses?
What we're noticing with millennials who are taking leadership positions in the old sense of leadership that we'd imagine by designation, by title. They're taking formal leadership roles within organizations and governments. Mm-hmm. And we have Generation Z or Gen Z now taking up their first work positions as well. At the same time, in certain parts of the world, it is possible to live a 100-year life. What does that mean for us if we move to a society that values vocational stuff as much as academic, where you could have a 16-year-old apprentice, but we could also have a 75, 8-year-old apprentice because they might not be as proficient with digital. And digital is not the future, it's the present. The world is digital now. What does it look like for apprentices that have 2, 3, 4 generations gap. And this is the beauty of where we can step into followership and leadership. We can listen deeper. I describe the 4 levels of listening. We can suspend judgment or the need to push our perspectives to tap into different ones and recognize without judgment that my nephew and niece, they don't know anything other than phone, iPad, Netflix. They don't know what it was like. For me, I remember not having anything but a small Nokia 3310, not having to worry because of the bullies, that I would be bullied at home as well on social media. Thank goodness we have empathy for people who are trying to make sense of a digital world, because we haven't done our bit as well to explain what is humanity and what does it mean to lead a good life. And when the millennial or Gen Z or Z challenges us, we do have cultural norms about respect. The first picture you know in the book is the reverence to elders, emerging past and present. We have so much to learn from our mentors. And reverse mentorship is we have so much to learn from these people as well. How does empathy look like as we express it to them? We need to maybe make a 1 degree shift. When somebody challenges, culturally that might not feel good, but that challenge could be very real and important for us. People who are disrupting the status quo, they might be perceived as not good in performance management, quite difficult person. That could be a partial truth. Is it also a perspective that they could be helping us to evolve? So I think for the millennial piece, it's for all of us to say, let's not be bound by our generation, but let's honor it. And then step into the conscious leadership of how do we lead and follow, mentor and reverse mentor, so we're in this together.
Yeah. Together we can bring about change, right, Samie?
100%.
Yes, sir. Sir, unmute, sir.
Very simple question that I want to follow. By nature, I don't want to do anything. So I want to follow the model, do nothing. Do nothing. But it is very, very challenging because when we see others 24/7, they are busy, then you feel that you are missing out somewhere. So can you give some tips to me?
I love that question because, Mr. Bishnu, sometimes the stimulus, the trigger we described, and the risk, it's do nothing. That is an action, if you like, in a way. Or at least should we say, it's a conscious choice that is available to you when Coco or whatever you call monkey goes back to sleep. You start to see the choices that were not immediately available to you in the first 6 seconds. And that's why our mums taught us, sleep on it. Tomorrow is another day. Don't act. But when I joined this call, Rashna said, you've had a busy day. I said, not busy, intentional. Yeah, I have many things to achieve. But I think this is one of the most controversial aspects of my message, where I say to people, for me, Samie, I have no goals in my life. I am on a quest to lead a goalless life. And our society, we talked in my presentation about how we are rewarded, how we are given status, and how we honor achievement. With no goals, that is quite confronting to people because it makes us ask the other question of, so then what's our purpose? But isn't that the bigger question that we need to be asking? When we achieve a goal, we release inside our body dopamine, and it makes us feel good. But the problem is, that feel-good transmitter is also released when you win in gambling, for example, or when you don't do things with the values, the how in mind. We need to be aware of our mind, body, spirit, nature. I don't want to live a life which is future focused, where achieving that next big thing means that when it's done and tick, when we see that our inbox is now all red, or we've been able to remove some things from our to-do list, knowing it's just going to fill up again, there'll just be more things to do. What does it look like to live a life where we say, I have enough, I am enough, I'm in the marble. And with that, I am going to hold some intentions rather than goals, where I am not attached to the outcome. I'm impervious to the outcome. I'm engaged and yet indifferent, being like water. I'm still at times, and I'm a powerful tidal wave at times, but just that stillness of, I don't need goals to validate my existence. And that's why when I set up Marmalade Fish, year one, I loved being called a CEO. Until year two, I realized it's just an illusion. And then I was able to get rid of my title and just replace it with, I'm Samie.
That's great, great, Samie. And my thought process and your thought process, they are very, very close. If you ask my student, I also believe strongly in what you have said. And that is the only way we can remain happy, because I'm a big follower of Bhagavad Gita. Whatever you are saying, that also matches with Bhagavad Gita.
How wonderful. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Pooja, you can come in with your question. Pooja Dhandania.
Yes. Hello, Samie. It's a great honor to talk to you. Your book is wonderful. So I'd like to, my question was related to what Sir just spoke to you, that have you read Bhagavad Gita? And then I would like to follow that with another question.
Of course. So I have in my degree studied theology and philosophy. That was over 20 years ago. And my dad, being Arabic, he said, well, you should do business. He said, well, what is this? You should do government. So he told me I was allowed to be a lawyer, doctor, diplomat, or engineer. And I said, but I just love philosophy and theology, where I was able to study all of these texts and different perspectives. I remember even one essay, it was Torment of Christ versus Serenity of Buddha. Discuss. Imagine this, well, ideas. And then I went into the business world afterwards. So yes, I have had the fortunate thing in my life where I've been able to look at all these different texts and to take the learnings, little from here, so that I become all religions and also none.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
Pooja, please,
Thank
your
you.
question, please.
I would like to ask, like you said that business does not exist in isolation. It is a part of a systemic matrix. So how can this matrix be more humanized? If you could just give us maybe 3 salient points.
I think that in a virtual world, it is the awareness that people are experiencing the pandemic in a different way. Don't assume in your leadership that other people are having the same experience. So it could be that some people like you to check in on them a lot, and it could be for other people that they're fine with the team call that happens every couple of weeks. This feels operational, logistical, or tactical, but what sits underneath it is by asking your team, what do you need from me? What works best for you as we make sense of initially work from home, and then in different parts of the world, what they're calling a hybrid model. Engage people according to their needs, not, leader, what you prefer necessarily. create space in your agendas to recreate what we used to call the water cooler moments. When I work with leaders in person, the energy field is immense. You cannot recreate. I don't care what anyone says. For Samie, I've not been able to recreate it in the same way as when we go back to in person. So then, what are the moments that we can create intentionally to try and give space for the human-human interactions? Because we are social beings. That's in our nature. I found that asking power questions instead of closed questions works. For example, any questions is less effective than, what questions do you have for me? Do you need support from me? Is different than, what is one thing I can do this week to support you? Checking in at the beginning, let's say on the Monday call. How is everyone? There is no other agenda. And I would love to share one thing you learned and what is one challenge that you have. Let me go first. And role modeling the vulnerability-based trust, which is foundational of any relationship in business or otherwise. These are a couple of things that you can implement today, but is going to shift your leadership.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. That's so nice. Siri, with your question.
Thank you, Rachna. Hi, Samie. So my question is that, time and money have been invested very wisely by various generations. There were generations where they would keep time and money a little for themselves and use it for the betterment of others. But this generation has been wrongly, they're coming out to understand that they're going to be alone and that all the time and money have to be used for themselves. This somewhere is affecting humanity. What do you think could change this kind of a cycle of thought? Should it start in, yeah, please answer. Thank you.
What a challenging question. I love it. So, time is an illusion that we live in. And Einstein with relativity even taught us all those decades ago, if you measure time nearer the ground because of gravity versus towards the top of our heads, there is a difference in how time is experienced. If somebody passes you quickly or slowly, then time is relative. And then from our rational brain, we don't need all the answers. There are certain things that are unknown to us. It is now fact we can travel into the future. Time travel into the future is possible. Is it possible looking back? Through the Hubble telescope, you can see up to 13 billion years, and hopefully with the new telescopes to the beginning of the formation of our universe, which one day, let's try and get our head around this. We argue about which statue should be created or taken down. One day, there will be nothing. Nothing in the universe will exist again, or should I say not exist? I think it's the ultimate perspective. But we like to have control. We think it's a good thing, but level 2 is it's an egoistic thing of trying to manage without surrendering. And time and money are things that we like to have control over. And we put importance or ascribe value to them. And it changes across country, culture, and across generation. So we know it's not a fact. We know it is a cultural perspective of which all can shift, evolve, or change over time. But at the moment, if you achieve money, then you are seen or perceived by certain people to be X, fill in the blank. But at a meta level, money is just energy. What if conscious leadership, therefore, we started to reward and recognize people who had a lot of energy, but not just money. I think that's a real possibility for us. And then step one is getting control. Remember, be you, do you, for you. Get control, and then step two, let go of control. Time and money are energies and illusions. We can create new cultural norms of what they represent. Anybody who has a lot of money, I say, fabulous. I only have an issue when you pull up the ladder and stop other people who might hold aspirations, which some of them might include things that require money energy. And what we find is this model of make, take, waste. And we're seeing this with big tech giants now. But because we don't fully understand AI and we think it's sexy, we think digital is cool, we're not having the conversations about we are the users of their services, but what are we giving up by having the free use of a platform? And hopefully the chapter in the book, which is called Progress That Isn't, opens some perspectives. I'm not a 5G conspiracy theorist. I just put 2 paragraphs in there to say, should we talk about it? In Dubai yesterday, they said they're now doing 6G. Should we have a conversation? Do we want to be that hyper-connected? But not see, let's talk about it. Great
Yes,
question,
absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. Samie, now coming to curiosity, Samie. So you've mentioned curiosity is an open sesame to learning. First, I'm curious about why this name of your company, Marmalade Fish. And secondly, Samie, why a retired 747 and not a new one?
So you've caught, let me start with the 747 before going to the university.
Okay.
I have in my biography that I want to own a retired jumbo jet. And
Yes.
I'm realizing that on my quest to lead a goalless life, actually I do have 3 goals.
Mhm.
I want to do goat yoga. I want to see whales in the ocean. And I want to own things from a 747. So I still have some goals on my quest.
I found it very strange. Why not a new one?
Well, when I was a child, because freedom was always my core value, when I was a child and I used to look up at the Queen of the Skies, there was something about her with the upper deck and the nose, which I guess like a perfume or a song took me back to the freedom that we have and the ability to use technology to enhance humanity. Though, of course, there is a conversation about sustainability. So with the 747 being retired by most airlines during the pandemic, the benefit is I now have one 747 window downstairs, I have a bar trolley, and I have a crew jump seat as well in my house. And my mum just asked me one question, why? I said, I have no idea. But I'm happy with that. Regarding curiosity, I say it's the open sesame. I was watching some curious kids the other day, and they were a little bit, we would say, naughty, but very curious, not scared of failing, experimenting, making sense of the world, asking questions. Why? Why? Stop asking mummy, what, but why? But why? And I think there are certain things that we can take from our state of being a child where we don't fear failure, I should say, where we want to try new things and explore new possibilities and make sense of this VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we live in. Because what happens after the age of 7 or 8 or 9 is we start to dim our humanity. And we do so in order to behave and conform to the expectations of what it means to be proper. These are wonderful things and they should be learned. But every action has a cost. The cost of this is we no longer put our hands up and go, I don't know, because we try to have all the answers. Because we're then taught in secondary school, the people who have answers, they get gold stars. But guess what, in this new world, we don't have the answers. None of us.
That's,
So
that's conditioned, I would say.
Exactly. So I noticed 30 companies that are very big, multinationals, have just included curious or curiosity into their corporate values. Whether they are lived or just espoused, I'm not sure. But there is an awakening to curiosity and making sense like an artist of something that develops and changes meaning. And I would invite all of us be a little bit more curious without being too naughty so that we still function in society.
Yeah, and be like a child always.
Absolutely. As for marmalade fish, you can imagine Dad's dismay when I said I would call it that. But
wow.
Yeah, it turned out to be a wonderful thing because people can connect with a message of humanity through a metaphor. It turns out, but it was an accident. I was in Japan, I was looking at the symbolic koi fish, and as I looked at them, I thought, so beautiful. And then when I looked closer, I realized it was a little bit stagnant. It was a bit chaotic, like every fish for itself. And I had this insight in silence, thinking, how many systems I've belonged to that looked marble and fancy and wow from the outside, but inside there was stagnation, chaos, and every person for themselves. As I had that insight, this one fish, she turned out from the crowd, the school of fish, and she started to jump and swim upstream, and other ones broke free and followed her. And I said out loud, gosh, it only takes one. And the gentleman who was a tour guide said, she's always like that. Her name is Marmalade. And that's how the name Marmalade Fish was created. It only takes one.
Wow, so beautiful. Neelu has a question, and then I would like to hand over to Sonali to wrap up the session with her question.
Of course.
Yeah, Neelu, you can come in with your question. You have to unmute, Neelu.
I have. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for the most lovely, interesting and enlightening session. At the outset, I want to apologize. I haven't had the privilege to read your book. However, I do practice the concepts you spoke about all my life, especially the good deeds and gratitude. They are very simple to practice, but I always have a problem with one, which is forgiveness. So how do I overcome that?
Forgiveness, Neelu, is a process that cannot be rushed. You cannot bake a cake for 5 minutes at 1,000 degrees. You need to bake a cake over 30, 40 minutes at 200 or 250 degrees. And for it to rise and be fluffy and then very tasty and appetizing, it requires us to check and to have patience. Forgiveness is a choice that at the most meta level, it sets us free. And also to recognize that life is hard. We all have a story, and there are people who they should seek forgiveness from us. The uncomfortable truth is we should also seek forgiveness from some other people. As a concept, when I wake up in the morning, I try, before I get out of bed, What are 3 things that I am grateful for? And it frames my day. In the pandemic, one of the most empowering gratitudes was, thank goodness, in the pandemic, I have a house to isolate in the moments when I was tormented with my core value of freedom being trapped. These challenging times help us to get into because there's always somebody or something worse than us. Forgiveness has been a really hard journey, but I recognize it has shaped me into the person who I am. All the bad things allowed me to come to this point of speaking to you, Nilu, and the broader community. And though I recognize it's a process and justice is flawed, the real truth will never be revealed in this lifetime, I do recognize, like Coco, I'm choosing to stay trapped. I'm okay because I'm not there yet. But I still recognize I'm choosing to. It's a long journey that all of us are grappling with.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Samie, I would say that this book is just what the doctor ordered. Fabulous book. Fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, Sonali, please come in.
Yes. I'll just take 3 rapid questions and then we'll give vote of thanks.
Wonderful.
So, Samie, are you up for 3 rapid questions?
Okay, are these 1-word answers or just quick?
It could be it could be 1 word or 8 words or less.
Okay, I'm ready for the challenge.
Yeah. So, first question, what drives you?
To be fully in service to something bigger than me.
Wonderful. Best advice you ever received?
Don't act.
Wonderful. Worst advice you ever received?
It was feedback where I was described as, you are very intense and you should, not could, be aware of the other people because they might be threatened by you. So what you need to do is, and because it was working in a bank, the suit represented another layer upon another layer. And towards the end of my career in financial services, I realized that all the opinions I took in order to be validated and seen in the system, I didn't have, who's Samie? And when I left, I no longer had a title. So it wasn't, what am I? I remember very well the next morning I woke up in my pajamas and I had this existential crisis of, who am I and what am I here for? I think the worst advice is when you tell people what they should in order to, I don't think that's helpful.
In my opinion, your being intense is a positive quality.
You're very kind. Thank you so much.
Being human is a given. Keeping our humanity is a choice. Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. Samie, 40 acts of humanity is truly inspiring. Be you, do you, for you. It's a great takeaway for all of us here. Thank you, Samie, for gracing our forum Suryodaya today. It has been an enlightening session with your deep passion in answering all the questions so humbly. I pray and hope that human race understands and start valuing before it's too late, because it is indeed time for humanity.
It's finally time. You know, it's here. And I want to say thank you to you and to all of the community. I don't want this book to be just a book. When you write about on social media or you speak to people, use the hashtag whenever you like. It's not mine, it's ours. And if the book resonates, please do share word, because I'm not going to put any marketing spend behind it because I don't want it to be one of those books. So a little bit like the Celestine Prophecy, if it's useful and it inspired, my ask is tell one person so it gets into the hands of whoever needs to read it. But what an honor to be with you on the finale of season 2. And having these conversations gives me hope. We will be just fine. So thank you for your leadership, conscious leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you.